نانو راديو دمص إيرترا DC إيو راديو دمص إيرترا DC كرام قدام بمنقد مربب حبريتا اب voiceoferitra.com ويون بمنقد يوتيوب تقمط واشنطن دي سن كبابيان كمون نملع علم يفنو كورات خططت سمعت الراديونا خمي كان يكون كاب تمسخهم قناة راديو دمص إيرترا بمجمريا رحس كنيات مبل 5 عامة فيستيفال إيرترا أب حورات منسات أمريكا سنة 4 يكبرنا نوربو نايلو مقدام حاملة إسران شواتن إسران 4 ويدما 27th of July 2024 مسانا روزينا نانهو بكتالكم دما بتحتنا يدم ቀዳማይ ዜና ካብ ከተማ ኣስመራ ኤርትራ በወኪልና ጋዜጠኛ ገረመስቀል ገረዝጊሄር ካልኣይ መደረ ፕሮፌሰር ለገሰ ኣስመሮም ኣብ ፌስቲቫል ኤርትራ DC 2018 ዝሃቦ መግለጺ ካልእን ተጠቓለለ ክኸውን እዩ ኣብ መግበረባታ ዝተፈላለዩ ምልክታን ሓበሬታን ከምኡውን ንዓኻትኩም ኣዘናግዕ ዝበልና ሙዚቃን ኣዳሊና ኣሎና ኣብዚ ናይ ሎም መዓልቲ መደባትና ምሳና ሓቢርኩም ክትጸንሑ እንዳተላበኹ ሰናይ ምክትታል ክኾነልኩም ብስም ፖድ ድምፂ ኤርትራ DC ይምነየልኩም ሰናይ ምክትታል ይናፍቅኪ ዓደ ይናፍቅኪ ዓደ ካብዚ ካብ ዋሽንግተን DC ሬድዮ ድምጽ ኤርትራ ዝመሓላለፍ ዘሎ መደባት ይኹም ተከታተሉ ዘለኹም ክቡራት ሰማዕትና በመቀጠል ዜና ካብ ከተማ ኣስመራ ነው ፈጻሚት ቦርድ ሃማዴ ትግባረ መደባት ቀዳማይ መንፈቅ ብምግምጋም ኣብ ሓድሽ ስትራቴጂካዊ ውጥን ስራሕ ዘትያ ሃገራዊ ማሕበር ዲዛይነራት ኤርትራ ሞያዊ ዓቕሚ ኣባላቱን ምዕባይ ዝሕግዝ ስልጠና ወዲቦም ማእከል ስልጠና ሓይልታት ፖሊስን ጸጥታን ብቴክኖሎጂ ኮምፒውተር ዘሰልጠኖም ኣባላት ፖሊስ ኣመሪቖም أمريكان إسرائيل أما أكلاي مبرع حدش وتهدرو كيدان كمسرتا قدامي منستر نتانياهو زويعهم أبلتشن إسران سلسن بدرجة عالم حدقات 100 نايزن سلالوهم 7 قطري لعلي 750 مليون من بارو تقريزهم فتصاميت بورد هاجراو محبر دق أنستيو إيرترا بعسران 25 حملة على أسمرا بزكان آخبة تكبار مدبات قدامي منفق بمقمقام بحدش استراتيجيكا وهوتن سرح زتيام أبديام أكلاي بيت صحفة التخايد آخبة نقعاتن بقعاتن دق أنستيو المعباي تساتافنت دق أنستيو معدة مرتن مدبات نمعاتن كبن مبال تعنا دق أنستيو كوتبا وعاقمنن مدنفع وداب من إسيات دق أنستيو المحيال كمون كان الزعباتات بزملكت ببزبو نيزت سلاسل مدبات سبسبات بمنزر حيال دخمن قنتات قريبون بعمقات تزتيلون فتصاميت بورد محبر رايون علاماتاتون نمجبات ببقوانو استراتيجيكا ودنات الناس على خسرح مصلحو نهلو بدهوتاتن تقلباتن ابقمت بمئتاون نزلو عدلات لعلا غالبو بمهاب دما زمسقن سراح يعمم كمزلو تقنزيبام أمود أتاب زغطل كالعين منفق ودابتات دق أنستيو بمحيال كل مداون قحاتن تساتفنتن معبايك كايدو زنح مدبات بزحاي لك قصلو أمر ددا تبتيحهم هاجراو محبر ديزاينرات إيرترا مويا وعاقمي أبالات المعباي زحجز بقبرن كلس حسابن ستسنية سلطنا كاب عسران حدن كساب عسران 4 حاملة بسمرا وديبوم عبديب موهاد مسكومشن بهالن سبورتن إيرترا بنبار عادي إنجليز ماستر ديزاينر سولومون زكاريا ستوها بسلطنا 200 عسران قدايمن حدستن ديزاينرات أبالات محبر تساتفهم قدس سلطنا قدي الباسات من لاي حبرتات ديزاينرا وسرحات موديلن فلليات فاشنن ستايلن كمون باهلي وقعن مثلن بهيرات نازوكل الباسات كم زتقالل بريزيدنت هاجراو محبر ديزاينرات إيرترا آتو أبراهام سلطان حبيروم أسلطاني ماستر ديزاينر سولومون زكارياس بقديو نعرفت جزيو أب كم زبالة تذكار عيو محلافو حابن كم زسموعة بمقلات هاجراو محبر ديزاينرات إيرترا مويا وعقمي أبالات المعباين زكايدو زلو تعار موقيسوم حلافي كفل من محدارن فاينانسن كومشن بهالن سبورتن لتنال كورانيل ساميل زقايدما نماستر ديزاينر سلومون دحر ممسغان سلطنتين زقسمو تمرتي بقبري كسر حلو تثبيت كم زقبر لهم قليصوم تساتفتن إيرينا بزهاب ورئيتو سلطنان زصنحن فلطت زدرع مخان بمتقاس كم زعينت سلطنا بزاف حملكع ككايد تلابيهم ابدك امحره تدوكينو زركب ماكل سلطنا حيلتات بوليسن صدتان حدا ورحي بتكنولوجي كمبيوترن انترنتن زسلطنهم 19 دقه انستيو زركبهم 25 ابالات بوليس ب 24 حمله امريهم ابتي ماكل حلافج انفر بوليساو تمرتي ميجر
عندهم محاري أبزس معقل سلطنتي كاب كلن زوباتات التواضع مخانم بمحبار نتي بقندو أمكل خال جبن زتوكرة بكل حساب جبرن زتسنية سلطنة عبتي زتمدبلو جزء ببقعات كم زازمو أرديوم أمور داتا سلطنتي كابيد أزاز مأكل سلطنة حيلتات بوليس زتان برغادير جنرال آدم كوكول مكتل أزاز تمأكل كونيل زرعي قالابن حلافي من محدار بوليس إيرترا لتنال كونيل حيل برهن ورقات مسكرن شلمات تقبلهم ኤርትራውያን ተቀዳደምቲ መርሃው ቅዱስን መትከል ኢዮብን ሎሚ 25 ሓምለ ብዝተዛዘመ ብዩሲአይ ናይ 2.2 ደረጃ ዝውሃቦ ታሽዓይ ዙር ድባኒው ማንጊ ኤጀን ቀዳማይን ካልኣይን ብምውፃእ ደሚቖም ኣብዚ ካብ 22 ሓምለ ኣብ ኢንዶኔዥያ ዝተኻየደን ኣብ 4 መድረኻት 678 ኪሎሜትር ዝሸፈነን ውድድር ምስ ክለብ ትረንጋኑ ተሰሊፎም ዝተወዳደሩ መርሃው ቅዱስን መትከል ኢዮብን ኣብ 162.8 ኪሎሜትር ዝሸፈነ ራብዓይን ዛዛምን መድረኽ ተመራሪሖም ቀዳማይን ካልኣይን ብምውፃእ ድሙቕ ዓወት ኣመዝጊቦም بدمر وزيد نير بعدي مدرخاتون كلتيم إيرتراويان تقدمتين بجا ماليا قدماين كلاين ماليان بسعة قدما بتمساسالي قدماين كلاين بموزع ندرب عوض بقع مالهم أبزيل على 7 تقدمتي زتساتف وزور كالوت إيرتراويان إيفان يمانن أخليلو قبر هيوتن بقدم تقتل مبل 26 حدن وزيم ب21 حدن حملة بزتزازمة مبل 110 حدن تور دي فرانس أبال بيلجماويت كلب إنتر مارشي وانتي إيرتراو بينيام قرماي سلستنهي مدرخ عوضات بمزقابن قتلا ماليا بمونانن أب تاريخ نايتو ودر حدش تاريخ كم زسرحه زذكر يوم أمريكان إسرائيلنا بزبا مأكلاي مبرق حدش وتهدرو كيدان كمسرتاك قدماي مينستر بينامين نتانياهو تزويعهم قدماي مينستر نتانياهو ب24 حامل بكتما واشنطن دي سي نكونغرس أبزهابو مجلسي اتمدب كاب إيران كمتسن زغل زتاون وتهدرون سقات ممكات مخان حبيروم جيوبوليتيكاون قطباون ربحاتاتا نموحاس أبتزوبا وتهدرون متأتتاو تقبر زل أمريكا نتقويت إسرائيل بقوة خم تقبلو إزمات إذا خمسيلن كله قدماي مينستر بينامين نتانياهو هاجر واوشمت قازات كايدو زلا دبداب من قصاص حماس كساب زدمسس كتقصلو مخانا دقيمو انصيروم بزدما بتوشمت زورد زلو سباو كسراتات بتعزازافي كزايد كم زغل باغو يمت قدماي مينستر نتانياهو بتوشمت زلا مقراص توخسيخ تكبر كقرب نزصنحه اهجراو صوعيتات كم زنصغو يفلاد أبز حلفة عامت بدرجة عالم حرقات 100 نايزن سألالوهم سبات قطري لعلى 750 مليون كم زنابرت سبات ودب حبرات هاجرات أفريدهم بجمجم حدك بعصرت حد سبات اتكستة قاد إمو من بارو تم سبات بتوسخ نتزيرهم اتهاز قدمي كستة كورونا فيروس من زنابرخ النتازر كله بالعلي 250 مليون كم زوسخ أيز قلات أفريقيا آسيان سفيح كفال سمينن دوبن أمريكا بتترقيو حلف كالي كبابيتات عالم كم التهاسي تفليت اللهم
أقداسي حبرتا ندليت جزا نايل على 18 عام تمكرو زلو أو واشنطن ديسن فيرجينيان ميرلاندن فقط زونن بوانقهم زراداكم سامر ريلتر لكم مقدي مسود عدي خمز بحال جزا خدشتون كتجزون مستدليون عقبت عماويلو زغنة مخصبو سامر امبايا يخون مرجعهم ترجم ناي منبار دميقة متان كحلو ميزانا منبري بايتا نتاتح ناتي انبلو جزانا مسهلاونا دسقم كبر وحسنت عبيتنا بدرب مخسب زخحس عبي كركب كم بيتنا اوه مفتح جزاوتنا نعتر مس سمر امباي ريلتر
توسخي حبريتا نقولكم شيء تجزع ماويلنا بحاله % راح ملو اقلقلوت كنبوكم تذالينا خمزلنا نحبر
نزيادة حبريتا أو قصر سلكي شوعت 03 كلتا حادة شوعت حادة خلتا 00 اندقنا قصر سلكي شوعت 03 كلتا حادة شوعت حادة خلتا 00 سامر امباي لكم توكسو
But my presentation goes more directly into the research I conducted in Eritrea. I was in Eritrea from 1984 when I went to Meda, 1998 again, 88 sorry, again, and then from then 1991 I went to Eritrea and for 25 years I've been doing research all that time, including the 3 years of the Wayane War. Each year was spent deeply involved in defending the rights of of the victims of war. And so all of that is part of the background that I want to talk about here, because if we are going to make peace, then we'd better understand how we got here. We better understand how much damage was done during the Wiyane War. The Wiyane War is exceptional. It's not like previous wars in Ethiopia. They did things that nobody else did. They did more cruel, more vicious things than anybody else did. I'll give you some examples. There are many, many examples. Desecrating churches and mosques, actually defiling them by having sexual intercourse with prostitutes in the church and then leaving condoms scattered about in a mosque that I saw in Hajar. Desecrating the graves of Tigray. Some of the Tigray may have died actually fighting on behalf of Tigray. They go and desecrate the grave. Then, when I was in Basra, I discovered that something had happened during the occupation of Wiyane occupied Basra for a couple of years. And at that time, for more than a year, the soldiers were gang raping Muslim Saho women on Basra mountain on a daily basis. And they were doing it in groups of 7, and they were told not to take their firearms when they go to do this. They'll just carry daggers. And then they would gang rape the women in the presence of their children and their husbands. To me, this was horrendous. Why? I don't remember. A lot of cruelty has been committed by Ethiopians who are fighting wars, but nothing like this has ever been documented, ever. So things happened. By the way, I took Mama Amina, who was the woman who agreed to testify about this, to UNICEF. I took her to Sweden, and she testified before UNICEF. And the wife of Olof Palme, the assassinated president of Sweden, she is the spokesperson of UNICEF. She fell in love with Mama Amina and took her around all over Sweden, heavily draped in warm clothes, because we arrived there in dead winter with Sweden completely covered in snow. So anyway, she spoke out on behalf of women who have been victimized in this fashion, so on. So many instances of cruelties that were committed by Wiyane. So who incidentally, when that war was in progress, where was the power, the drive behind that coming from? I don't think it came from all of Tigray. It was part of Tigray that was completely devoted to the idea of reconquering Eritrea. Why reconquering? Because a few decades earlier, Ras Alula was the governor of Eritrea. And Ras Alula, there are people who call themselves the Alula today. Why the Alula? What's the big deal? It is the notion that we governed Eritrea, and just to a certain extent, they expect that is their right, that they are destined to govern Eritrea. So when the opportunity came up to fight the war with Eritrea, they went into it with a passion that was extraordinary. And not all of them shared that passion, by the way. I think Meles Zenawi and his crowd were not all that eager to go to war, and were suspected of being sympathetic to Eritrea, partly because Meles was half Eritrean. And so they threatened him. When threatened, he responded by started saying really terrible things about Eritrea and being as violent as they are, in order to save his skin, basically. And so this is the deep hostility. I divide Tigray into 2, East and West. And East and West are 2 completely different things in my mind, from my experiences. Western Tigray, Shire especially, is separated from Eritrea by the Mereb. So there's no question of friction about the border. There's no There's no fence pushing, as happens on the Agame side all the time. The Agame side, the area they call Golomokheda, is the places where throughout history there has been friction about the border communities, constantly. And the Eritreans arm themselves and fight to maintain their plots of land, their homes and their properties and so on. So something happened on the eastern side of Tigray that has never happened in any other part of Ethiopia. That is the successful winning over of part of the Saho nation called Irob and making them part of Tigray. And this was a campaign that lasted for decades. It was a very calculated job. It started with Asimba, the massacre of the leaders of Irob. The Irob were converted to Catholicism in 1840, before Catholicism saw any other part of Ethiopia, way back. And so for generations they had been educated. They had an educated class, and they wiped out the entire educated class in one go, the Wayane did. 22 people were killed. Among them were PhDs and doctors. The rest of them fled. The rest of the educated Europe fled and took refuge in Sanafe, and I interviewed them in Sanafe. They've written to me profuse life histories to say how they were driven out of their country. Thereafter, the attempt to win over Europe didn't start with Asimba. It started decades before that, by the ruling house of Agame. They're called Shum Agame. That's the title, their traditional title. Shum Agame and the Irob nobility, if you can call them that, have invented a genealogy that is a common genealogy of the two peoples. That is to say, to show that the Irob and the Agame have a common descent. Irobs are Saho, they don't even speak the Grinya. But here we are creating a genealogy that says that they are of common descent with the royal house, the quasi-royal house of Agame. So after Asimba, so what happens is they proceed to give Irob everything that they could hope for. I mean, they gave them facilities, they gave them wealth, they built palaces for the villas and palaces for the bishops of Irob and so on. So when we came to have our referendum, an issue arose: would the Irob be allowed to vote? They are Eritreans, like Eritreans everywhere, they should be allowed to vote. Wayane insisted that there should be no voting booths for the referendum in Irob. And there are many Irobs, fighters and others, who are deeply wounded by the fact that Eritreans in every part of the world, wherever they are, including Ethiopia, were voted in the referendum except the Irob. And that is a wound that really is very difficult for them to forget. And so I suggest that we do a bit of rethinking of our history to see what it is that was done during the war, and if we are going to be able to heal the wounds that were created by the war, then one has to begin to recognize and acknowledge what was done. In other words, there can be no peace unless the two parties are fully willing and fully prepared to acknowledge what it is that they've done. This was done in South Africa. This was done in Rwanda. The two parties in the genocide in Rwanda came together to say, both of us must admit what it is that we have done that is so terrible to the other. And once the admission has taken place, then the peacemaking can go on. But if you are in the business of sweeping history under the rug, covering up all the terrible things that, when I give presentations in conventions like this one, and describe the fact that there was gang raping of women that took place in Basura, my Ethiopian colleagues simply said, "My goodness, you're making all this up. It doesn't happen." Never happened, So if you deny all the things that were done, there's no way that peace can be meaningful to the people who are the victims of that activity. And so if I begin to hear from the Tigrayan side some admission of the terrible things that they did during that war, then perhaps there is room for making peace. Without that, I don't think peace will be real. Forget about whether it will be lasting or not, because lasting or not is a matter of institutions that are created that may facilitate the continued existence of the relationship. But beyond that, there is a matter of trust that has to be created between the two peoples. Why is it that we are so fascinated by Abiy? Because he really starts with the premise that there is something good in human beings, and he goes searching for it, and he finds it. Our response to Abiy was tremendous. It was extraordinary. And so was the Ethiopian response to Isaias. Up to that point, I don't think they ever really thought of Isaias as being in any way a friend. And all of a sudden, there's this profusion of sentiment that's expressed by Ethiopians. Why? Because he's a leader who has bypassed all the shenanigans of the old state and gone ahead and communicated directly to people on a human-to-human, conscious-to-conscious level. And that works. That does amazing things. The structure building can go later. And as far as the structure building is concerned, there are many things that are going to come up as we proceed to improve relations with Ethiopia. One is the question of access to the sea. That is, talk about anything that you want, but if that issue is not resolved, then the Ethiopians will not give us peace. And so, access to the sea doesn't mean the same thing to all Ethiopians. As far as Gondar, North Gondar, and Tigray are concerned, the only access to the sea is through Massawa, not through Assab. As far as the rest of Ethiopia is concerned, Assab or Djibouti or Mombasa, they have plenty of choices. Now, so for us to begin to think about access to the sea, it has to be in relation to North Ethiopia and Tigray on the one hand, and the rest of Ethiopia on the other hand. The Tigrayans, so far, I don't think they have made any significant move to say they're going to go along with the proposal of that's been made by Dr. Abiy. The fact that Hadbadem is going to be handed over to Eritrea, which was Eritrean to begin with, is something that is not acceptable to many, and there are many that are complaining about that. As far as the armed services are concerned, I heard Dr. Abiy addressing the generals in Ethiopia recently, and he was lecturing them at great length about how to reform the armed forces. And I don't think he'll have any difficulty in persuading them to follow through with the system that he's proposing, and at the same time he's retiring some of them and accusing others of corruption and getting rid of them that way, and so on. One way or another, I think probably Abiy will have his say, but I agree that the armed forces, if that's not entirely under the control of the Prime Minister and the central government, it can be a major source of problems. Currency is going to be another problem. Our currency is not traded. The exchange rate is fixed. Their currency is traded, and it changes day by day. So what currency do we use to trade with each other? That's the question. Do we use dollars? Do we use cryptocurrency? Or do we use something else to do the trading? And so on. So there are many issues like that has to be re-examined. The most important, from my perspective, issue that has to be re-examined is the plight of all the villages along the Ethiopia-Eritrea border, which were never part of the Ethiopia-Eritrea Border Commission's research work. The maps that they prepared are maps of the physical environment. Rivers, towns they've included, streams, and so on. But it's a physical map. It's not a map of human geography. They ignored human geography completely. So when I was after the end of the war, I was traveling all around the border area, and I succeeded in mapping out the whole border region and placing all the villages on a map. The president saw that map. Somehow it reached the office of the president, and President Isaias asked who made this map, and they told him Asmerom, and so he said call him up, and so I was summoned and asked to hand over all the maps. He said this is very dangerous because if this falls in the hands of Uyane, they can use this very effectively, and I agreed. So they were kept under lock and key since then until now. And my hope is that I'll go back to working with those maps again to see which villages are actually on which part of the boundary. We don't know that. And so at the time that this happened, Kasai was governor of Zoradobu, and he saw my map and he said, please let me have this map. And so I said, well, with the consent of the office of the president, you can have one. So I gave him one. Because they were traveling along the border, not knowing when they're actually stepping on territory that may actually be in the hands of the Uyane. Very dangerous stuff. So in any case, the plight of all those villages, a lot of villages, two things have happened with regard to the border. On the Sorona side, a big chunk of territory was taken from Tigray and given to Eritrea. Okay? Besides the town of Sorona, everything north of the Belasa River was handed over to Ethiopia. That's very damaging for Eritrea, but it was done. On the Gulomachada side in Agame, a big chunk of territory was taken from Tigray and handed over to Eritrea. So I discussed that with Kasai. He said, why don't we trade those two pieces of territory and solve the problem that way? We may be able to do that if there is peace that is actually accomplished. But in the meantime, what was happening was that Uyane was doing a lot of fake research to say that the border was drawn in such a way that it was splitting villages. It was separating churches from their congregations and so on. They produced hundreds of ugly pieces of information to show that the boundary ignored all these important realities. So what was their purpose? Their purpose was to say that the boundary is not valid. So we should renegotiate the boundary. My purpose is not that. My purpose is to see what happened to those people, how many people have lost their land, their wrist on either side, and have settled on the other side of the territory. They are now either Eritreans without their choice or Ethiopians without their choice. And so I think one of the important things for the boundary communities is to consider their right of return, if they wish to return, or to their right to get citizenship in the territory that they have now been assigned to. So there's a lot of important key issues of risk and of citizenship that is going to be part of the negotiations that will have to be conducted. So I have ad-libbed through my speech without looking at my PowerPoint presentation, so we'll forget it.
كبر سمعتنا بنايلهم معلتي مرباتنا عجيبكم كتكونوا تسفى قبر